is exciting. I hadn't focused on the 250th anniversary. We tend to focus on right now, today in this place. And I think that's really exciting. 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, such an opportunity to reflect on our great nation. So how long has it been since the castle was open?
The castle just closed about a year ago.
Okay, so then you're going to reopen parts of it?
Right. The goal is that the amount of work that has to be done in the castle, the initial plan was for the castle basically to have the mall torn up during the 250th. I said, we can't do that. So what we're going to do is do interior work so that we can have the castle open for the 250th. And then after the 250th, we'll do all the earthquake work that's going to tear that's going to really help make it difficult for people to visit the castle.
Okay, and since the pandemic, I was just seeing that your average visitors up air and space, before you closed down for the work, I assume, 7 million, but what has it been like? Because a lot of people were worried we wouldn't bounce back.
I think the numbers have been really good. We are now at pre-pandemic levels throughout the entire Smithsonian. And then couple that with all the digital work we're doing, we're reaching more people than ever before.
Could you talk about that, what you've done to make it more accessible, the museum, virtually for people maybe in a little town in Nebraska, farmers that aren't going to be able to leave and are, because they've got their crop coming in? Talk about how you made this accessible.
What I realized is that the Smithsonian needed to have people who really could help us lead the digital transformation. So I created a unit to do just that. And we're really looking at how to really be in every home and in every classroom. So part of what we're doing is making sure that we find the right partners that we can collaborate with. Because I've realized that the Smithsonian, no matter how creative it is, doesn't have broad enough shoulders to do everything. So we're working with a variety of entities to make sure that we can digitally share the information we want to do. But also, we're partnering with people like the 4-H clubs and looking at different organizations that have never worked with the Smithsonian to allow us to reach these many communities. And I think what I've really said to everybody is the 250th is our opportunity to demonstrate all of that change. So I'm using that as the marker to say we're going to do everything so that by the 250th, you can see a new Smithsonian.
Very good. So let's talk about the two new museums. And when you last appeared before the committee, we talked about the ongoing efforts to establish the museums. Since then, as I noted, they both hired founding directors. We've got that over $65 million for each museum, private money, and the efforts are going forward to build the collections. There's a lot of excitement, bipartisan excitement in both houses for moving forward. Well, it's not at this point funding issue as much as the location. Could you, and we have been able to establish now with the agreement of both groups, 2 locations that I had seen. I think they're really a good idea. What can you tell us briefly about that progress, what's being done to talk to the public about this, and well, answer that first.
Well, I think that, first of all, things are going very well with these museums. The $65 million that was raised is really important. When I was building the African American Museum, it took me 4 years to get to $65 million. So there's already a great deal of excitement about these new museums. But also what I've said is that these new museums, even though they're not, they don't have a building, they've got to share content. They've got to do things digitally. So we're doing programs, education programs around the country through the lens of each of these museums to build excitement, to let people know about it. And candidly, the hiring of Elizabeth Babcock as the new director, that's a way to sort of get more attention because she's new, there's a lot of articles about her. So basically, the goal here is to begin to do work to say the history of women, the history of Latinos can't wait for a decade. It's got to be done now. So we're looking at different ways to do that. How do we make sure that we're doing programs around the country now to build that support? So I think that from a vantage point of where we are, we're in a good place. The challenge, candidly, is finalizing the sites, because fundraising will pick up even more when you're able to finalize a site. 2, you cannot plan on what the museums will be without those sites. So therefore, it's really hard to sort of keep people excited as you're saying, eventually we can tell you what's going to be there.
I mean, it's kind of extraordinary all these funds have been raised without the sites, but before Senator Fisher was the rankings. Senator Blunt and I went out and looked at the sites. And could you talk about those sites and how they fit in with the vision of the mall? I know the Board of Regents has approved these sites. Architects, historians, preservations are consistent with this area of the mall in our nation's capital.
Well, I looked at 26 sites around Washington. We looked at sites that were vacant, we looked at sites that were historic buildings, and after looking at all these sites, we realized that what was essential was to have these museums as close to the mall as possible. That the mall is where the world comes to understand what it means to be an American. And to be able to have women's history and Latino history on the mall was crucially important. We looked at these sites, one that we call the South Monument site, which is across from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is this really sort of gem-like site that's going to be the spot for the Women's History Museum. And then we have another site that's behind the Holocaust Museum that would be the site of the Latino Museum. What's important is that these sites allow several things. One, there's great excitement in the various communities that they're going to be able to build these museums on the mall. Two, it allows these museums to craft architectural vision, to be able to say, we want a building that reflects our culture, much like we did with the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So there's great excitement about the potential of new buildings on new sites. And candidly, while there's always a question of how do you preserve green space, what I love is the building of the African American Museum has enriched the mall. It hasn't hurt the mall at all. And I think these new museums will do the same thing.
Okay, very good. Thank you.